In my home, you either spoke 6 languages fluently or you stayed completely silent. Have you ever been punished for something so ridiculous? It completely shattered your reality? My mom once slapped me so hard I flew out of my chair. And my crime? I accidentally used a French word on a day when I was only supposed to speak Spanish. You see, neither of my parents spoke a single word of anything but English. But they had this deep, bizarre obsession that multilingual people were some kind of superior species, and that they'd ruined their own lives by only knowing one language. My mom would literally cry watching videos of people switching between languages, sobbing about how beautiful it was and how stupid she felt. My dad would get hammered and just go on these long, rambling rants about how if he'd just learned languages as a kid, he could have been someone important, not just a guy working in a warehouse. So, when my older sister Louise was born, they made a decision. Their kids were going to be different. Every day of the week was a different language, and you were forbidden to speak anything else. Monday was French, Tuesday, German, Wednesday, Mandarin, Thursday, Arabic, Friday, Russian, Saturday, Japanese. Sunday was review day. If you slipped up, spoke English, mixed up languages, the punishment was instant. No dinner. Locked in your room for hours. Sometimes Mom would make you write lines, hundreds of them, in the language you messed up. Tutors were at our house every single day after school. My parents couldn't understand a word they were teaching us, but they'd sit there, watching us like hawks, just to make sure it looked like we were learning. My brother, Wyatt, was only 11 and already having full-blown panic attacks before his lessons because the tutors would report back to our parents if we weren't progressing fast enough. They'd record us. They'd post videos online, sending them to distant relatives with captions like, "Look at our genius children." If anyone complimented us, they'd puff out their chests, acting like they'd personally achieved something spectacular, even though they couldn't understand a single word we were saying. Then, when I turned 13, they sat me down. They told me I had exactly 2 years to become fluent in all 6 languages, or else. They were sending me to this boarding school in Europe. They showed me the brochure. It looked like a prison. Kids in stiff uniforms, sitting in silent classrooms. No phone calls, no visits for the first year. My dad said, "We've already contacted them. They are expecting you unless you prove you don't need to go." I was already studying 4 hours a day after a full day of school. I was exhausted. My real school grades were plummeting because my brain was just mush. Wyatt was falling apart, having nightmares about the tutors. And one day, I just snapped. During my Mandarin lesson, something inside me just broke. I started spouting complete gibberish, just sounds that vaguely resembled Mandarin. I told the tutor I'd been studying some advanced materials online. He just looked at me, completely baffled. When my parents asked how it went, the tutor said I'd been speaking something he didn't recognize. I told them it was a rare regional dialect, that maybe the tutor just wasn't educated enough to know it. And for 2 glorious weeks, I got away with it. Wyatt caught on and started doing it, too. We were finally getting a tiny bit of relief. And then, they brought in the experts, real linguistics professors from the university, people who were actually fluent in all 6 languages. They tested us for hours, and it took them about 5 minutes to realize we were faking. When they told my parents we'd been speaking nonsense, my dad went nuclear. He grabbed all of our language books and started throwing them at us, one by one. Mom was screaming, just screaming about how embarrassed she was, how it made them look like fools. They grounded us for 2 months and doubled our study time. Tutors in the morning before school, tutors at night after school, tutors all weekend. I was getting maybe 3 hours of sleep. I started falling asleep in class. I couldn't do it anymore. I went to my school counselor and I showed her the bruises on my arms from where the books had hit me. She called Child Protective Services. That same day, they removed me and Wyatt from the house. We stayed with a foster family for 2 months, and it was the first time in my entire life I could just speak. I could speak English without thinking. Wyatt started sleeping through the night. I actually started to enjoy school again. It felt like we could finally breathe. Then came family court. Mom and Dad showed up with their lawyer and all 6 of our tutors. The tutors all testified that we were making great progress, that this kind of education was a gift. The linguistics professors came, too, and said that while our parents' methods were strict, we were genuinely learning. And then my own sister, Louise, got on the stand. She testified that she was grateful for her upbringing and that Wyatt and I were just being lazy. The judge ruled that we had to go back home. That night, Dad sat us down at the kitchen table. His voice was cold. "From now on," he said, "there is no more English in this house. You will speak the 6 languages, or you will not speak at all." I just sat there, frozen. My hands were pressed flat against the table to stop them from shaking. Dad's eyes darted between me and Wyatt, just waiting for one of us to slip up, to say something in English so he could prove his point. The silence stretched on for so long my ears started to ring. I risked a glance at Wyatt. He was staring at his lap, his chest rising and falling way too fast. He was trying so hard not to cry. Finally, Dad pushed his chair back and walked out. Mom followed him without even looking at us. I reached under the table and squeezed Wyatt's hand once, then let go. Even that felt dangerous now. The next morning, new schedules were taped to every single wall. Kitchen, living room, bathroom, even inside the pantry. Mom pointed to the Monday French schedule and said something in French that basically meant, "We're starting now." And it was just heavier now. The words felt like rocks in my mouth. By Tuesday night, I was so tired I couldn't see straight. I kept falling asleep over my German homework until Mom shook me awake, her fingers digging into my shoulder. She stood over me until I finished every last problem, close to midnight. On Wednesday, when everyone was asleep, I snuck into the kitchen. My hands were shaking as I tore a tiny piece of paper from a notebook and wrote in English, "We'll get through this together." Just seeing the words I chose, made my throat tight. I folded it up as small as I could and slipped it into the front pocket of Wyatt's backpack. The next morning, during our breakfast of forced Arabic conjugations, I saw him find it. His eyes went wide. He glanced at me, and he gave the smallest, tiniest nod I've ever seen. And in that moment, that tiny connection in our real language, it felt like the only true thing in this whole nightmare. But things just got worse. The school counselor, Mrs. Sutherland, saw me looking dizzy and exhausted in the hallway, but I was too terrified to tell her the truth. I was so scared the judge would just send us back again, and it would be even worse. That weekend, Dad asked me a question in French. I started to answer, but turned to Wyatt and whispered one word in English. One word. Dad heard it. He stood up so fast his chair crashed to the floor. Before I could even react, he grabbed the thick Russian textbook off the table and hurled it at me. The corner caught my shoulder, and a sharp, blinding pain shot down my arm. I fell off my chair, biting my lips so hard I tasted blood, because I knew crying would only make him angrier. He stood over me, screaming at me in English about breaking the rule. The irony was so thick it was suffocating. Later, in my room, I looked at the dark, ugly bruise already forming on my shoulder, and something inside me just shifted. I couldn't live like this. I didn't know what I was going to do, but I knew I had to do something, or I was going to break completely. The next day, I went to the library. I took out a piece of paper and I started writing. Dad threw a book at me yesterday. I wrote about the no English rule, the exhaustion, the fear. It felt like breathing after being held underwater. I decided I was going to write everything down. I was going to build a case. A few days later, I heard Wyatt having a full-blown panic attack in the bathroom before his Mandarin lesson. He was hyperventilating, crying that he couldn't breathe, couldn't do this anymore. I coached him through the breathing exercises our foster mom had taught us, whispering in English, terrified our parents would hear. His tutor, a woman named Isabella, arrived and saw how red and puffy his eyes were, how his hands wouldn't stop shaking. I saw her glance at our parents, who were watching from the doorway, and her expression changed. She saw something. Then my parents locked down everything. They started checking our browser history every night, our phones, our tablets. The prison was getting smaller. The next time Isabella came for my lesson, she saw the faded bruise on my arm. The second my parents left the room, she leaned in and whispered in English, "Are you okay?" Her voice was so kind, I almost burst into tears. I just shook my head, unable to speak. That small moment of someone seeing me as a person, not a project, it cracked something open inside me. I created a secret email account and messaged Mrs. Sutherland, my counselor. We set up a meeting. In her office, I finally told her everything. I showed her the new bruises. She took pictures, and then she did something I never expected. She opened a drawer and pulled out a small MP3 recorder. "It's from the lost and found," she said. "If you can record what happens at home, it will help." That night, when my dad exploded because I failed a science quiz, I pressed the record button in my pocket. I recorded him screaming that I was worthless. A few days later, I recorded him threatening to send us to that horrible boarding school. I uploaded the audio files to a secret cloud account. It felt like I was finally fighting back. Then came the Immersion weekend. A tutor stayed at our house for 48 hours straight. We slept in shifts. There was no escape. On Saturday, I heard my dad yelling at Wyatt. Then a crash. Our neighbor knocked, asking if everything was okay. Dad put on this big, fake smile and laughed it off. Intensive study sessions. You know how it is. The neighbor just nodded and left. And my heart just sank. But my evidence was growing. The live stream was the real turning point. My parents set up a camera to show off their genius children to relatives. During a break, when they thought the camera was off, my mom got angry that I'd used a French word during the Spanish section. Her hand came up so fast. The slap was sharp and loud in the quiet room. And the craziest part? One of my friends from an online support forum was watching. She screen captured the whole thing, the slap, the red mark on my face, and sent it to me. Then Dad found the MP3 recorder. It fell out of my pocket. He picked it up, pressed play, and heard his own voice screaming. He smashed it against the counter, pieces of plastic flying everywhere, screaming about betrayal. He grounded me, took my phone. He thought he'd won. He thought he'd destroyed my evidence. He had no idea about the cloud backups. My parents, terrified we were getting help, pulled us out of school to homeschool us. They cut us off from the world. But it was too late. Mrs. Sutherland had already filed a new report, citing our suspicious withdrawal. The attorney she'd found for me filed an emergency motion. One evening, there was a knock on the door. It was the CPS caseworker, and this time, she had 2 police officers with her. My parents tried to perform, to be the caring, concerned parents. But the police presence changed everything. They couldn't just talk their way out of it. The caseworker interviewed Wyatt, and he just broke down, telling her everything about the panic attacks, the nightmares, the constant fear. 2 days later, the caseworker was back. She told us she was recommending we be placed in foster care again, that our parents had proven they couldn't keep us safe. The final court hearing felt surreal. The judge reviewed everything, the photos, the recordings, the tutor's written statement, the police report, the doctor's notes on Wyatt's anxiety. She ordered our parents to complete anger management and parenting classes. She terminated their rights for now. We were going back to our foster home for at least 6 months. Walking out of that courthouse, I felt a weight I'd been carrying for years finally lift. Now, I'm back in a regular school. I chose to take Spanish as my elective. My teacher is kind. She makes it fun. When I make a mistake, she just corrects me gently and moves on. There's no punishment. There's no fear. The freedom to just choose, to use whatever language I want to express myself, feels revolutionary. Healing isn't a straight line. Wyatt still has nightmares sometimes, and I still flinch at loud noises. But we're safe. We're talking. We're figuring out who we are when we're not constantly afraid. We saved ourselves. And for now, that's enough. I'm genuinely curious. Have you ever seen a parent's good intentions go this horribly wrong? Let me know what you think in the comments below. I'd really like to hear your thoughts.